Porter, and I am a state contract analyst at the State of Utah Division of Purchasing. Today, the goal of this training is really just so everyone is on the same page about Amazon. So one of my great duties that I get to partake in at state purchasing is that I'm one of the main Amazon admins for our business account for the state. And so I get a lot of questions about Amazon, naturally, and it's become pretty apparent, even though we've done a few trainings at PEP and other places on Amazon, I got the impression people were still not clear about how Amazon works. Obviously, a lot of people do, some people don't. They don't know when they can and can't buy from Amazon. That's really what we're going to be looking at today. And of course, we're going to be going over, very basic, high level kind of procurement strategies as well. So that's kind of the point. Not a huge fan of this form of presenting, or any presenting, if I'm being totally honest. But if anyone has comments, questions, I am trying to look at the chat. And so please utilize that. Feel free to chime in as well if you have a mic. I don't want this to just be me talking for an hour, but it might happen that way. So we'll just get into it. So Amazon has really become just a force to be reckoned with in our lives, not just for business, but in our personal use as well. It's just like you buy everything on Amazon these days. I know I almost do. And, I'm a millennial, maybe that's typical, but it's really the go-to place to buy, which is why I want to talk about it, right? Because it's become so convenient, it's become so wide used that we need to really understand this awesome tool. I'm also a huge fan not only of buying on Amazon, right, in my personal life, but of The Mandalorian. And so Baby Yoda had to make an appearance in this presentation. Some people, they need Amazon. It's almost like shopping online's become some kind of addiction or something in our life. And so I think it's kind of become a go-to, right, for buying, like I've mentioned. And so we kind of need to retrain ourselves, though, when we talk about public procurement and buying for our agencies. It can't just be the go-to, right? There's processes, there's rules, there's this little thing called the procurement code. There's all these things kind of hanging over our head that prevent us from just going to Amazon like we might want to and like we're used to in our private lives, right? And so we're going to talk about just talk about really high level when you need to buy something. And my goal is showing this flowchart, which makes its way in and out of purchasing trainings from time to time. And I want you to understand by the end of this where Amazon is inserted here, okay? And so we're just going to go through this flowchart really quick. So if you need to buy something for your agency, and this applies obviously a little differently depending on what agency you are with, right? Not everyone is an executive branch agency that needs to go through state purchasing. And so it's kind of hard to always talk about stuff like this in a way that applies to everyone. But kind of as we go through this flowchart, if it's not a must for you to use a statewide, or if it's not a must for you to use, UCI, it's usually a may. So you can kind of just adapt it to your individual procurement unit needs. So kind of when you first need to buy something, you think, okay, is there a mandatory use agency that legislation or rule says I need to use? Okay, the biggest one that I think of here is UCI, Utah Correctional Industries. They can do different things, right? They can embroider shirts, they can do shirts, they can do furniture, they do a lot of furniture. And so unless you're a political subdivision or the School for Deaf and Blind, you need to use UCI. Okay, that's in the procurement code. And so that's a lot of people. It includes state level agencies that are independent, but that do not need to go through purchasing, for example. So it's a pretty widespread mandatory use agency. And so you're like, okay, UCI can't make the thing I need, or any of these others that are listed here. Then you go down, okay, do I have an agency-specific contract that can get me this good or service? And the answer is obviously yes or no. Usually agencies are very familiar with their actual contracts that they have put together, right? Uh, it's not like the statewides, for example, where you got to get online, you got to search around, you might not know what's out there. Usually you know what kind of agency contract you have. You're like, okay, this isn't on my contract. Now the question is statewide contracts. I feel like this is where most of the action happens, right? You are trying to go out for a procurement, you're debating whether or not you can just do a small purchase or something, but you want to check first to make sure whether or not it's on statewide contract. These are mandatory use for most executive branch agencies, and they need to be used regardless of the dollar amount, right? That's very key. So if you're an executive branch agency, it doesn't matter if it's $5. If it's available on a statewide contract, you need to use it. And that's something people often kind of forget about sometimes, are those really small micro purchases that need to go on a statewide contract. So, and then if you're not an executive branch agency, obviously this is a may. You may use the statewide contracts, but you're not required to. The advantages, of course, are that you know it, follow the procurement code, that you're going to be in compliance with the procurement code when you use a statewide contract. It's also nice because there's no dollar threshold when you use a statewide contract. So it enables you to, it's not just for these small purchases, it could be a relatively large purchase, but you've shopped around the statewide contracts and it's in your best interest to do so. And you can buy it regardless of how much it is because it went through a competitive process, of course. So statewide contracts are awesome. Obviously, I work at state purchasing, so I have to say that. I'm literally paid to say that. And so obviously, statewide contracts are awesome. And then let's say you've gone through all those. It's not on a mandatory use. It's not on the agency-specific contract. It's not on a statewide. Now you're going to start looking at thresholds and whether or not you can buy this as a small purchase without quotes in accordance with whatever rules you use. The ones listed here are from the administrative code. We often call them the administrative rules, section R33. And so this is essentially if each individual line item, when you go to make an order, is under 1,000 and the aggregate or shopping cart is under 5,000, you're essentially able to buy that without getting quotes, right? And so that's kind of a high level analysis. This flow chart and this basic high level procurement thinking is going to be in this training kind of throughout. So just wanted to go over that just a little bit. So I wanted to kind of do a question right at the start. My son just started preschool. He's 4 years old, and they do an assessment right before the first day. And so I'm not treating you like preschoolers per se, because I'm assuming a lot of us are very advanced in procurement on this call. But I want people, I didn't do a fancy app or anything, so just in the chat, I just want you guys to blow it up with what you think the correct answer is to this, okay? So the question is, as it stands in this moment, when can an agency order an office supply from Amazon? Okay, assume that this agency must use statewide contracts and needs to follow the procurement code. I'm not going to ever be talking about something that's not the procurement code, by the way. So, A, they can order the office supply from Amazon. B, only if it's not available on other statewide contracts. C, only if they get an exception from the CPO because it is on another contract. Or D, they just can't do it. So looking at some answers here. We got a T. Thanks, Nick. Great. Mike is correct. Nick is wrong. So I see A's, I see B's. It's kind of almost 50-50 from what I'm seeing so far. So that's good. So I think, like I said, people are more familiar with this than others. The most likely correct answer is A. The reason for this is because Amazon has their own statewide contract. And so it's not like, it has the same, it enjoys the same status as all our other statewide contracts, right? And that's something that if you're not going to take anything else away from this training, like take that. Take the fact that Amazon has a statewide contract. Try to get that out there, get that message out there. I think this is like the fourth or fifth presentation I've given on Amazon. They have a statewide contract with us. B and C are really good options, and they were correct a year and a week ago before Amazon had a statewide contract with us. Mainly, right, that for quite a time, well, quite a time, always with Amazon until about a year ago, you did need to check with all the other statewide contracts first. You had to ensure that it wasn't available. If it was available, you would need an exception from the CPO. Again, assuming that you're under the auspices or jurisdiction of the Division of Purchasing, right? The Central Purchasing Office for the state. Great question, Lenny. And that wasn't something I was planning to talk to, but I'm so happy you asked. So it's still strictly P card purchases. Uh, the high level reason why we need to set it up that way, because Amazon Business does have the functionality to allow invoicing and POs as opposed to just using a P card and paying for it right then. You can essentially kind of have like a line of credit with Amazon, right? You make the order and then they invoice you and you pay later. But unfortunately for the state, that doesn't really work. It would be more appropriate, Dana. So yeah, maybe Lenny, I assume that's what you meant, because a PO, right, would be a firm offer where you send them a PO and they respond by ordering the thing. So it's really the same idea as I understand it, is you send a PO, they send the item you ordered, and then you pay by an invoice later. So I interpreted that to be basically the same thing. And so the reason why we can't do that for the state is state purchasing owns the business account, but we have dozens and dozens of separate agencies on that account. And unfortunately, the functionality is not there where we can turn on this feature for a specific group. We just can only turn it on for our account as a whole. And what that means is that state purchasing would essentially be liable for everyone's invoices, right? And that's just something that we can't take on, essentially, or we're not willing to take on, unfortunately. And so that option's not there. So you do need to use a P card, and hopefully that answers the question, because we don't want to be responsible for everyone's spending. Okay, good. I've mentioned his name a couple of times. I've mentioned this acronym a couple times. I was really working for a way to work in this picture into my presentation at any cost, and I think I found a good place for it. So I've talked about getting exceptions from the CPO. What is the CPO? Okay, our current CPO is Chris Hughes, and the CPO is the procurement official for the State of Utah Division of Purchasing. If you're an independent unit or a political subdivision, you don't really have a lot of interaction with the CPO other than, I mean, he does get statewide contracts. He has that authority to do cooperative contracts on behalf of the whole state. And he also is on the procurement policy board. So if you use the administrative rules, R33, he's one of many people on that board that has, some input on what those rules do. But he is kind of the shot caller for any agency that needs to go through state purchasing in our central office. If you're an independent unit, you have your own procurement official. That's either outlined in the code or in your own code or rules. And so you should know who that is and who your shot caller is. But for the state as a whole, kind of generally at the state executive level, it's Christopher Hughes. And in addition to all his duties and responsibilities, he makes for an excellent caricature. So I've talked about the contract already. It was executed just over a year ago on September 11th. The much lesser, far second thing you need to remember about September 11th will be the Amazon contract, obviously, but never forget that we do have an Amazon contract. And in order to use the contract, you either need to be on our state Amazon business account. Anyone that's on there will automatically be enrolled with Amazon to track all your purchases for the contract reporting and all that. Or you need to set up your own account with them on your own. And so when you go and look at the Amazon contract on our website, the instructions are hopefully clear on how to do that, but essentially you need to fill out a form and send it to Amazon, and they'll get you set up to use the contract. But again, if you're already on the state business account, which most executive branch agencies are and some other agencies and political subdivisions, you're already ready to go. You're already using the contract and you might not have even known it. Another thing I wanted to highlight, we got the contract with Amazon through a competitive solicitation, through a multiple award RFP. And so they're not the only name in the game, so to speak. We have these other contracts with these other vendors. And all of these contracts were based on the idea of a very flexible scope for office supplies, and they're online marketplaces with dynamic pricing, right? So they're unlike a lot of our kind of traditional statewides, you're not going to go to the price list and see all of the things Amazon offers you, right? It's just their online marketplace. It's the same essential Amazon experience that you're used to having. At the prices fluctuate, go up and down with the market. So that's kind of all these contracts here that you see listed. I believe Office Depot, not Deport, and Staples have other contracts with us that are kind of the more traditional style, where it's, you know, categories with price lists or with at least an online portal that is specific to that contract, not just, market pricing loosey goosey. And so just want to throw these out here. Pretty much everything I'll be talking about regarding the scope of Amazon's contract applies to these contracts as well. So Dion, I think that I don't know if someone can confirm that knows the contract numbers off the top of their head, but I believe Staples has, like I just mentioned, this contract, which is for an online marketplace, and then they have another contract with us that's kind of a more traditional contract setup. Both are essentially for the same types of items. It's just kind of a new, different procurement strategy that we've done. Okay, I'm going to look at the questions here. So if we have our own Amazon business account, those purchases are under contract, or do we need to complete the form I just mentioned? So you'll need to complete that form and send it to Amazon if you haven't already. That's important because it's part of their contract reporting obligation. Just like any of the contracts we have, statewide contracts, Amazon is reporting and paying usage fees on all the spend, right? Just like all our other statewide contracts. And so it's important for them to get you set up in that way so that they can accurately report under the contract. And it's a very simple form. I think it might even just be like a Google type form. So I want to talk a lot today about the scope of Amazon's contract because that is a question that comes up all the time. And so essentially, the scope is for office and school supplies. This snippet here is literally the language from the contract, right? And I want to kind of just go over it because it's a lot more flexible and open than you might initially think. So office and school supplies include standard office supplies, along with other supplies that may include kitchen equipment, supplies, and appliances if available. Glassboards and other office categories are included. So when you read this, you might just think, okay, it's like a normal office supply contract. But when you kind of think about the language and especially how the rules of construction work under the Utah Code annotated, include means this is not like a defined list. This is an open list. So when it says other supplies that may include and lists kitchen and appliances and stuff like that, those are just examples. It is much more broad than that. And essentially, it's really just about anything that is a supply you need for your office or school, except for a couple hard caveats here, which is IT and furniture. Again, this is the language from the contract. The examples for information technology are laptops, computers, and phones, and furniture is pretty self-explanatory. I don't get a lot of questions on furniture because I don't think people buy a lot of furniture because we have UCI, right? We have other statewide contracts for furniture. But keep in mind that furniture is also not part of Amazon's scope. Pamela, you asked an excellent question. If it's okay, Pamela, I'm going to wait just like one slide to answer your question. So the short answer is those are okay. And so the kind of, we don't have a lot to go on in the contract language, right? A lot of statewide contracts are very specific in what you can and cannot buy. They often have published price lists, and if it's not on the list, you can't buy it. Or their categories, and if it's not in the category, you can't buy it. The category here is so broad, but it's by design because we want to take advantage of the online marketplace of our vendors. So kind of fleshing out more like what is an acceptable office or school supply. This is a quote again from Chris Hughes that I have used multiple times and is now going to be recorded and saved for 99 years in the state's vault because that is how this works. A fishing pole could be an office supply for DNR, and a hammer could be a school supply for a school shop class. I have quoted this and requoted it when people have asked me what is part of the contract. Really have to kind of almost think outside the box with this one. This contract is not for pens and pencils and staplers and stuff. It is for that, but it's also so much more. And so as long as you can really justify that this is a supply your office needs, and when I say that, I mean, what is the purpose of your agency? And what do you need to buy to fulfill the purpose of your agency? As long as it's not a few carved out things that we'll get into more like IT and furniture, it's going to be available in the Amazon contract. So going back to that language, right? It just said computers, laptops, and phones as examples. Again, that's not an exhaustive list, right? Those were just examples given in the contract, meaning you can't buy these under Amazon's contract, right? So we were kind of left with a lot of gray area that we are trying to define. And one of the main guides to define what we feel is IT in the Amazon contract is to look at our Department of Technology Services exception list. So for those not familiar, what this list is actually used for is whether or not an executive branch agency needs to go through DTS to make their purchase. How I'm talking about it here is how it's been a guide for us to say, okay, some of these items are not IT for purposes of Amazon's contract, and that they are okay to buy, even though they kind of are IT, right? So I'm going to click on this, and hopefully it appears on a screen where you can see it, but I think not. Can anyone see that list?
No, we don't see it. We still see your slide deck, Blake.
Cool. Let me represent. Can you guys see it now? Probably not.
Yeah, we can see it.
Yep.
Oh, cool. I did it. Okay, so this is the DTS product and services exception list. Again, I'm talking about it here in a way that it's not necessarily intended to be used, right? This is for people to know whether or not they need to use DTS. But what we've kind of done here is basically there's 3 levels. Okay, this top level is like you always have to use DTS. This middle level is like, you probably need to use DTS and you need to ask us for permission to not use DTS. And the bottom here is like you don't need to use DTS. That's essentially what this list is. So we've taken the things basically in the bottom row here and we've said generally these are not IT items under Amazon's contract because DTS has jurisdiction to buy IT items. So if DTS doesn't need to be involved in the purchase normally for our executive branch agencies, we're going to kind of use that as our guidepost of, okay, it's not really IT, you can buy it. So some examples, right? So we got all sorts of computer peripherals, mouse, keyboard, all sorts of adapters and cables. You're trying to hook up your monitor and you need an HDMI, but it only has a display port. You can go buy that adapter, right? It has thumb drives, blank CDs, DVDs, those kind of things. Really, it's all listed here. Speakers, projectors. So Headsets is another popular one. So these, and you think about any kind of accessory for a computer, it's probably going to be okay, but the actual computer, of course, would not be. So I just want to share that and kind of just give some insight of where we're coming from. It's not based on like randomness. We do have something here that we're going off of when we try to answer questions about whether or not it's IT or not. It's not just, the mood I'm in that day if someone asks me. Okay, let me try to represent my PowerPoint. Okay, can everyone see the PowerPoint again? Or is it coming up? Cool.
Yep, we see it. Deep dive on IT.
Cool. Thanks, Justin. Justin installed that fan, by the way, in case anyone's wondering. I failed after like 6 hours, and I had Justin do it because that's how manly I am. Okay, so takeaway on the scope, and if you have any questions, let's go. Bring them in the chat. But it's more about what's not in the scope, because essentially the scope is huge. As long as you can justify that it's a purchase for your office, for your agency, for your school, it's going to probably be okay. However, there are some hard no's, right? For instance, any of those examples that were listed in the actual contract, that's going to be a no. So you can't be like, hey, this computer is an office supply and I'm just going to get on Amazon because I have, Prime and it's all easy. Can't do it, right? At least not as an on-contract purchase. And we've, in our Amazon business account, and if we have time, hopefully I'll get into kind of more of that later. We have a bunch of rules around all this stuff, right? We have blocked and restricted categories where we have tried to guide people and help them to both stay within Amazon's scope of the contract and, follow procurement code generally. Hopefully I have time to go over that and show you guys kind of like what it looks like when you use Amazon. But I want to kind of go into test time. I want to kind of quiz everyone on the scope stuff that we've talked about so far, because I think that is the meat of this presentation, and it will help you understand when you can and cannot buy on Amazon. Okay. Daniel LaRusso got mad and threw Sam's laptop out of the window of their agency's office when he saw she received an inappropriate message. DTS has given him an exception, so he doesn't need to purchase through DTS. He wants to buy a $2,000 laptop on Amazon. Can he buy this on Amazon? No, no. That is correct. This is an actual question I received this week, or maybe a week ago. So the answer is essentially no, you can't buy it on Amazon in the sense that it won't count as a on-contract purchase, right? Because it's explicitly stated that it's not part of their contract. So going back to that flow chart, hopefully you still have that in your mind. You will go back and think, okay, is this laptop available through a mandatory use agency? DTS might be one of those, right? But they've given you an exception here. So no, not DTS. And then you go down, okay, is it on an agency contract? No. Is it on a statewide contract? No. And so now you're thinking, okay, maybe it is a small purchase. Depending on your small purchase rules, not my small purchase rules, but maybe your small purchase rules, this might be okay to buy. But on my small purchase rules, this would require a competitive quote. But in actuality, we have a bunch of statewide where you could buy this, so you should use a statewide contract. But that's kind of how it goes, right? So if you're an independent agency, maybe you buy it on Amazon after you've gotten a couple quotes, and for some reason you don't want to use a statewide contract if it's on there, but it won't be counted as an on-contract purchase, so you need to follow your rules. Okay, next question. Johnny Lawrence and John Kreese fought in their agency's break room and broke some appliances. Johnny sees that the bundle of appliances they need to replace are 10% cheaper on Amazon, is what it should say, than on the household and commercial appliances statewide contract. Can he buy it on Amazon? Okay, we're getting some no's, a lot of no's. Okay, interesting. So I have this as a yes. The reason being is Amazon has a statewide contract. So, you're comparing Amazon's statewide contract to the other statewide contracts. Because Amazon was issued a multiple award through a standard procurement process and specifically a request for proposals under R33-12-301B, essentially how you use that contract is you shop around and you make amongst all the contracts and you make a best value determination for your agency. And so if he's done that, which, the hypothetical kind of implies he does, he's checked another statewide that would likely have those appliances he needs to replace, he can buy it on Amazon because it's for his agency, it's an office supply, and it's in their best interest to do so after shopping around the other statewide contracts. Yes, whoever unknown is, I really appreciate you for knowing the references here. Okay, here's another hypothetical. Sam LaRosso can't find her USB flash/thumb drive. She assumes Tori stole it, but she doesn't have any proof. Sam finds the perfect flash drive on Amazon that comes with a karate-inspired dongle. She isn't sure if it's considered IT, though, and hesitates to order now. Can she buy this on Amazon? Yes. I feel like people usually do remember what items specifically they can buy. So you guys are all awesome. So yes, although a flash drive, I mean, come on, that's IT outside in the real world, right? It literally holds information on it and it's technology. But like we talked about, how we've kind of interpreted IT for this Amazon contract to try to clear out all those gray spaces, it is clearly not an item that we at state purchasing would require DTS to be involved in. And so we've kind of said, is it really IT then in a procurement sense? And we've kind of taken the stance that no, it's not. And so that's again going back to that exception list and what's kind of inspired us to kind of curate our catalog and create rules on Amazon and how to guide our eligible users to use the contract. Okay, Priscilla, you asked a good question. So why would you not need to go through Office Depot? So it kind of goes back to the previous slide here. So Amazon has a statewide contract, so it's on the same, playing field. It's on the same order of operations, or however you think about purchasing, as the Office Depot contract. And so it's not so much that you have to order it on Amazon versus Home Depot. You're going to be looking at both and making a decision of which one best meets your agency's needs. Hopefully that answers the question. They enjoy the same level of procurement life or contractor, however you want to think about that. Okay, so this is a screenshot. So now I'm going to talk about Amazon Business, the account, right? I've been primarily talking about the contract because that's what I think is most important now today, because I think a lot of people still are not familiar with that aspect of it. But here's kind of what our rules look like when you try to use the Amazon contract. So as you can see, this is a laptop. This is how it's going to look for you most of the time. I'll talk about why it doesn't look like this all of the time. This is how it looks like most of the time. It will say blocked. It will just say here, it's giving you a link to our statewide contracts. Hopefully you can see my mouse. And then as you can see, the add to cart function is completely grayed out. You can't even try to buy this thing on our state Amazon business account. And that's by design. It's not part of their contract. Our state agencies usually need to use DTS to buy this kind of thing. That's why it's blocked, right? Oh, I had a graphic on that. Here's how it looks like for me on the back end trying to create all these rules. There are over 2,600 commodity codes in Amazon that vendors can select when they post an item. Some of them are very broad. They're like computer accessories, and they are so broad. They are using that same commodity code to describe a computer as they are that flash drive or thumb drive. And so that's why I say it's not going to be perfect when you're using our webs or our account because it's not possible to be perfect. The vendors are choosing codes willy-nilly sometimes. I've had furniture codes used on toilet paper. I've had furniture codes used on solar panels. I've had codes all over the place that don't make any sense because the vendors are choosing those codes, and I don't know why they're using those codes. And so, how we've kind of tried to correct this recently, like this year, start of this year, is we went through all the codes when this functionality came out to really break it down by code, because before it was just very broad categories and it was really a lot worse. Now, with the individual commodity codes, we can kind of dial in, find those codes that are 99% of the time going to be used for an actual laptop and block it, while only restricting the general categories of, computer accessories or information technology or some random code like that. And so the difference between blocked and restricted allows you to still try to buy the item. This screenshot is not the best screenshot because it's talking about our tax exemption rule. But basically, the difference between that previous slide where it's blocked and you can't even buy it, when it's restricted, you can still try to buy it. You can add it to your cart. You can try to purchase it. And what happens is it will go to an approver. And on our system, that's not purchasing. It's set by the agency. So it's someone at the agency, like a finance person or a procurement person. They review the order. They decide whether or not they felt like it fits within the scope of Amazon's contract or whatever issues at stake, and then they can either approve or reject that item. Currently, printers are on the DTS exception list, meaning you need to have DTS involved, so they're unfortunately should not be bought, at least as an on-contract purchase through Amazon. So kind of what started all of this off, right, is when we got our Amazon business account. And why did we want an Amazon business account? This was, I think, over a year and a half ago. It's been a while. We worked with Amazon, and they identified that there were over 1,900 users with @utah.gov email address domains, and they were just like on all personal individual accounts. They were just all over the place. Some agencies had their own business account, right? So they were kind of, I guess, doing it right. They had oversight over their users, but a lot of them, there was little to no oversight. They had no idea who was using the email addresses. I've talked to agencies, they had no idea their people were even using Amazon, okay? And so there was a lot of spend going on out there that no one knew about, that we had no idea about. And so, and then of course, some people are using, not a lot, but some are using their P card or something to buy themselves things and getting it shipped to their house. And these are all kind of the things that we didn't want going on anymore. So the goal was to consolidate all that, to create an Amazon business account that the entire state could use, not just state executive agencies. Any political subdivision, any independent procurement unit, school, whatever, can join our business account. And so the idea would be that now you have oversight. Now you we have this catalog curation to help you follow the rules. And so that's kind of the idea, right? I don't know if anyone saw this. It came out 2 years ago and it was a kind of joint collaboration between Division of Purchasing and Finance, and why it's such a good idea to get on board. I'm just going over this because, again, this wasn't something that we kind of just jumped into. There was a lot of thought. There was a lot of discussions with other agencies. We wanted to get as many people on board as we could before we got an Amazon business account. So unlike the Amazon statewide contract, which went through a competitive process, the business account did not. It was a sole source. And there's a really good reason for that. We had a problem. We had a problem with Amazon. We had all these users and email addresses using our state email domain, and we had no oversight. It was just the Wild West out there. And there was only one organization that could really help ring in that specific issue and problem, and that was Amazon. And so that was the essential justification for a sole source. There's not really any other company out there that can help us manage the Amazon spend other than Amazon and getting an Amazon business account. And so that's something, again, takeaway. Our state Amazon business account is just kind of its own separate thing from the contract. Uh, it existed before the contract, and so that kind of space where there was like a year plus of just having the Amazon business account to then getting a statewide contract, a lot of people are still operating in that same mode of, well, Amazon doesn't have a statewide contract. I have to check all the other contracts. I can't buy this on Amazon. Things have changed. Hopefully people are picking up on that in this training. When you join if you're interested in joining the business account, this is starting to sound like a sales pitch. It's really just more work for me, so I promise it's not a sales pitch. But if you do, you can join our Amazon business account and we can get you set up. How it works is, we don't really manage you at all. We'll set you up with your own group within our Amazon business account. You guys will set the approvers that you want, the approval path, and then you guys kind of manage it on your own. You guys approve those restricted purchases. You don't need to reach out to us unless you have questions. We're not going to be bossing you around or anything like that. And of course, the perk is that we're paying for it all at state purchasing. So if it's something you're interested, reach out to me. It's really easy to get set up. Basically, I will send you an email and you'll be onboarded. So our account has Prime. So those are kind of expensive, right? When you do an Amazon business account with Prime, it's definitely a bit higher price tag. So that's a cool perk to joining our account. We are set up to be tax exempt. And you get a lot of oversight. You get the tools that Amazon Business comes with, the business analytics tools, so you can track your spend a lot better. It's like a finance person's dream. You can see everything that everyone's buying in your group, and you can see who approved it, and you can see all those details that you might be interested in. I've already talked about this a little bit, so this will be brief, but the blocked items, how it operates today, has a lot more to do with the scope of Amazon's contract than it did a year ago. So a year ago, or just before a year ago, when we got the contract with Amazon, there was a lot of blocking and restricting, and it was related to make sure you look at this other statewide contract because you can't buy this item until you check that statewide contract. Now, for the past year, that's a little different. Now it's more like, okay, shop around all the other contracts that might have this item before you make your best value determination. So they're kind of doing the same thing. The block and restricted, when they pop up, they'll have a link to our state contract site for you to go and check out the other contracts. But what you do with that information is a little different now. It's more like, okay, Amazon has a statewide contract, but I do need to kind of do my due diligence and shop around the other statewide contracts before I buy. That is a negative, Sean. And no video streaming. When you have access to the analytics, you can easily see how many restricted things were bought and who approved it. It's kind of a nice thing, a nice feature if there's ever a question down the road. And like I said, doing this training is kind of awkward. I know not everyone's on our state business account, but maybe this is giving you ideas of how you can curate your catalog if you do have your own Amazon business account. If you want help, contact Kayla. I've talked about this again briefly, so I'll just go over this one really quick. Kind of our basic rules on the account are it will need to get approved if your order is over $1,000. It's not exactly the small purchase rule that we find in R33, that threshold, but it kind of is. So, you could obviously have, 10 little things that cost $120 each and it's over 1,000 now, and you don't actually need to get quotes or anything for that. But, it's just to kind of flag it to make sure you're not going over those thresholds, and so the approver can take a look at it just as your agency as well, so you're not spending too much money. So, Anthony, so joining the state contract won't do anything. You will have the exact same experience. It's just going to be for Amazon to start tracking your Amazon business group's purchases. Now, if you're talking about joining our business account, which you don't need to do to utilize the contract, but if you want to, you can, then yeah, you're going to basically dismantle your old group and stop paying for it and join ours, and we pay for it. And I don't even know, honestly, if you need a business account or if you can just use a regular Amazon account and get set up with them. I think maybe you need a business account. And so, yeah, one of the main advantages, right, because a lot of people have their own business accounts, is you don't have to pay for it. State purchasing picks up the tab. These are just kind of like, dashboards and stuff. I'm not really into metrics. Any of the management at purchasing probably knows that I am not as into metrics as some other people, but you can get all sorts of metrics if you really want to. Look, they have bar graphs and stuff. It's cool. Wendy takes all metrics questions. This is just kind of how it will look. There's a lot of metadata that you can get with every purchase if you are really into that stuff. But what's nice here is you can see how much the order was. You can see exactly who approved it. These are all great when things when crap hits the ceiling fan, right? When things go wrong, you can go back in there and figure out what went on. So this is something that we did kind of initially, and I think we're going to keep doing. Uh, this is basically comparing the digital marketplace pricing to kind of the old style of contracts. I think we probably took a hiatus during COVID on this kind of project, but it's something essentially where we were kind of wanting to justify or show that there is value in uh, kind of the old style of office supply contracts that we use through NASPO Value Point to this new marketplace style. As you can see, not every single line item is always a home run. Sometimes the NASPO traditional contract way of doing it was cheaper, but sometimes the digital marketplace was cheaper. But overall, I think it is more savings to kind of have a digital marketplace style. That's just fun facts. So essentially, where we've come with Amazon, we started out very fragmented. We had no idea what was going on. We had tons of email address domains being used that we didn't know what they were buying. We had no insight or oversight. So now we have at least a much better system. I'm not going to say it's perfect, but we do actually have a system now. We can see into what every agency's buying. We can set up approval paths, and obviously you can't make that catalog curation perfect, but we at least have some guidelines to help people to not buy things that they shouldn't be on the contract. So I think it's been working well. I've been involved for a while on the Amazon admin side, and I think most people are pretty happy with it. Of course, there's always those weird things where you just have no idea when something's blocked and why. And so just reach out to me if you ever have those questions, because usually it's just a simple, well, the vendor chose a weird commodity code. I'm not trying to like ruin your day and not let you buy something. So you can always reach out to me. So that's pretty much it. If anyone has any other questions, feel free to put them in the chat or turn on your mic, and I'll just kind of hang out for a little bit. So Marianne, essentially, yeah. So what you'll do is you will basically close out your old account. I will email everyone you want me to email to join your new group on our account. And what's important is to cancel your subscription. That's a great point. If you join our account and you have an account previously, please cancel your Prime or business subscription, whatever you're subscribing to. I won't be able to do that for you. Mike Long has the deep allusions to this show. I love it. Debbie, I would like to clarify that on the items that require DTS involvement, this means DTS procurement people handle or authorize the purchase by the agency entering the request in ServiceNow. Right. So if you need to go through DTS, that is a primary reason why it's blocked on Amazon or should be blocked on Amazon. And so you'll need to go through DTS to make those purchases. And they should be using our statewide contracts, right? So that's how they should be buying it as well. But you want to go through DTS on that. So Gregory, if I could, what organization are you with? Ogden City. So I'm not sure if Ogden, so buying on a P card from Amazon and using our organization's Amazon account, I'm guessing you have an Amazon business account for the city of Ogden. Oh, no, you're fine. And so my guess is that you have an Amazon business account for your city, in which case you might be able to utilize the PO or payment by invoice feature that we talked about earlier. And so that's maybe what I'm thinking. And maybe, yeah, if you want to follow up with me, I think we could answer that. So Gregory, you should be able to link up with Amazon, get your account set up so that you're utilizing the contract, which again shouldn't change anything on your user experience. And then you basically have a choice. Do I use a P card or do I use the invoicing option? Because you just have your Ogden City account, you could do that. Unfortunately, like I mentioned earlier, we can't do that for our state account because there's so many different agencies and it wouldn't really work out. Okay, I'm done. Does anyone else have any other questions? All right, well, thanks everyone.